A shocking truth behind the scene of a happy family trip. At first glance, you might think you're witnessing a heartwarming family outing. A father pulling over to buy snacks for his young daughters. A seemingly innocent moment filled with warmth and joy. But behind this picturesque scene lies a chilling, dark secret that's almost impossible to imagine. The man in red, the one you just saw, is not a doting father. He's actually one of the most dangerous criminals imaginable. And the little girl by his side, she's not his daughter. She's a hostage. How could a criminal mastermind craft such a flawless picture of a happy family? What events led up to and followed this unsettling moment? Today, we'll uncover the horrifying truth behind this case. A story that shook America to its core in 2005. Before we dive into today's investigation, don't forget to like and subscribe to support our channel. Now, let's unravel this shocking case. A serene suburban backdrop, Kenai County in northwest Idaho, is home to the bustling city of Zion. A blend of urban charm and untouched nature makes this place a haven for adventure seekers. The federal highway system, especially Route 90, connects Zion to neighboring regions, offering seamless travel for both locals and tourists alike. However, peace shattered on the afternoon of Monday, May 16, 2005, when an unexpected call rang through the local police station. The voice on the line belonged to a man, slightly panicked, reporting a strange situation at a house in the quiet neighborhood of G. Love. He explained that he had knocked multiple times but received no response. Something felt off, compelling him to contact the authorities. Within minutes, a two-person patrol unit was dispatched to the address. G. Love, located 17 kilometers east of Zion, is a tranquil residential area with modest single-story houses scattered across green plots of land. This reported home fit right in simple, surrounded by thick bushes and a cozy yard often used for family cookouts. One of the responding officers was particularly familiar with the residence. The homeowner, Brenda Groene, a kind-hearted 40-year-old woman, lived there with her boyfriend, Mark G., a 37-year-old steel plant worker from Spokane, Washington. Together, they raised Brenda's 3 children, her sons Sled, 13, and Jylan, 9, along with her youngest daughter, Sasta, 8. Due to the demands of Mark's job, he frequently traveled across state lines, leaving Brenda and the kids at home. Usually filled with joy and the laughter of playful children, particularly young John's lively antics, the house was eerily silent that day. Approaching cautiously, the officers spotted a glaring red stain near the front door, a chilling confirmation of Robert's report. Guns drawn, they secured the perimeter and proceeded to check the back entrance, finding even more traces of the same ominous hue. Tension thickened with each step as they prepared to uncover the grim reality hidden within this seemingly ordinary suburban home. When officers finally forced open the front door, a chilling scene unfolded before them. A dark red pool stretched across the floor, forming a grim trail leading deeper into the house, as though pointing toward the horror within. The scene was nothing short of chaos. Drenched in blood, 3 lifeless bodies lay haphazardly on the floor, their hands bound and heads brutally bludgeoned, forming grotesque shapes resembling a twisted U. Initial identification confirmed the victims as Brenda, her boyfriend, and her eldest son. Determined to find the missing children, the investigators meticulously searched every room in the house. Oddly, the bedrooms of John and Shasta remained mostly intact, with only a few faint red stains scattered across the floors. This puzzling detail heightened suspicions. Had the 2 children witnessed the unimaginable and fled to safety, or had they been abducted? A thorough search of the backyard yielded no clues, pushing the investigation into even murkier waters. the grim possibility of a kidnapping became increasingly evident. As the case escalated to a state of emergency, the sheriff's office issued an Amber Alert, setting the entire city on high alert. The FBI quickly joined forces with local law enforcement, forming a powerful task force that not only pursued the murder investigation, but launched an intense search for the missing children. Despite contacting their biological father, Steve Groene, no leads emerged. Neighbors recalled that on the Sunday before the tragedy, Brenda had hosted a small barbecue gathering. Friends and neighbors enjoyed delicious grilled food, lively conversations, and laughter by the pool. By around 9 to 10 p.m., guests began leaving, blissfully unaware of the impending nightmare that would shatter the peace of this suburban neighborhood. News of John and Shasta's disappearance spread like wildfire, shaking the entire community to its core. Their faces were soon plastered on digital billboards and posters glued to walls throughout the town. Television networks and radio stations broadcast relentless appeals for information, urging the public to help find the children. The case garnered national attention, evolving from a local crisis to a story that gripped the entire country. Despite a painstaking crime scene analysis, investigators found no biological evidence pointing to a suspect. The absence of physical clues suggested a calculated killer, someone experienced or methodical in their planning. Given the brutality of the crime scene, detectives speculated that the murders might have been driven by personal hatred. Steve, Brenda's ex-husband, naturally became the primary suspect. Their troubled marriage, marred by bitter custody disputes, had strained their relationship over the years. However, preliminary investigations ruled him out. His sons, Jesse and Vance, both had criminal records. Jesse was incarcerated, and Vance had a verifiable alibi during the crime, clearing them of any involvement. Just as the case seemed to hit a dead end, forensic scientists made a stunning discovery. All DNA evidence at the scene belonged solely to the eldest son, Slade. There were no traces of either John or Shasta. The lab further concluded that all three victims had been brutally bludgeoned with a claw hammer. What twisted motive lay behind this heinous crime? And where were the missing children? The investigation was far from over, and darker revelations awaited. The perpetrator acted with brutal ferocity, repeatedly attacking the victims with a hammer until they succumbed to their injuries. It is estimated that this horrific massacre occurred during the early hours of May 16th. The first victim was Mark, followed by Brenda, and lastly, SL. Despite suffering severe injuries, SL appeared to have made a desperate attempt to move, but ultimately collapsed next to her mother. A shocking twist emerged when authorities discovered that Sasta and John had been kidnapped, but were miraculously unharmed. This revelation raised a significant question for investigators. If the abductor's sole intention was to kidnap the two children, why murder the other family members so mercilessly? Why not execute the kidnapping in a public location like a school or a church? Despite receiving numerous tips through the hotline, most leads turned out to be vague and unhelpful, making the case increasingly difficult to solve. 3 days passed, and investigators found themselves lost in a maze of mysteries, with no substantial breakthroughs. Meanwhile, attention shifted to the search for the missing children when a red Jeep Cherokee quietly departed from the crime scene, carrying Sasta and John. Both young victims were enduring a nightmare. Bound tightly and gagged, their tear-streaked faces bore witness to the terror inflicted upon them. The abductor drove them to a remote mountainous area in Montana, where he planned to execute the final part of his twisted scheme. The monster responsible for this gruesome tragedy was none other than J.P. Edward Duan III, a man described as a demon in human form. Born on February 25, 1963, at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, the largest military base in the United States, Joseph exhibited disturbing tendencies from a young age. He regularly tortured animals and bullied his peers. At just 15 years old, Joseph committed a heinous act against another boy, who, likely out of fear, never reported the incident to the police. A year later, he was caught red-handed driving a stolen car. Despite his youth, he was sent to the Tacoma Youth Detention Center and placed under psychiatric care. However, instead of showing remorse, Joseph arrogantly boasted to the psychiatrist about committing atrocities against 13 victims, even though he was only 16 at the time. For reasons unknown, he was released early, but the reform school had failed to change his violent nature. In 1980, Joseph meticulously planned another attack in Tacoma. He broke into a neighbor's home, stole weapons, and kidnapped a young boy at gunpoint. Under threat, he subjected the boy to unspeakable abuse. The case shocked the public, and Joseph was sentenced to 20 years in prison for theft and crimes against a minor. Psychologists deemed him a dangerous psychopath who needed to be permanently removed from society. Yet, after serving just 14 years, Joseph was released. Individuals like him, once intoxicated by the absolute power of controlling others, rarely abandon their wicked impulses. On a seemingly peaceful afternoon in Moo, California, on April 4th, 1997, horror struck when young Anthony was abducted right before his friends' eyes while they were playing near his home. A furious man wielding a knife swiftly overpowered Anthony and dragged him into a waiting car. The suddenness of the event left Anthony's friends frozen in shock, unable to react. 2 weeks after his disappearance, Anthony's small, lifeless body was discovered in a shallow grave 80 kilometers south in the city of Idaho. His hands were tightly bound behind his back, and his body bore horrific wounds. Police did everything in their power to track down the killer, relying on evidence such as an aging 1986 Chrysler New Yorker and a partial fingerprint. However, limited forensic technology at the time hindered the investigation, and the case reached a deadlock. The savage perpetrator behind this heinous crime was none other than Joseph. His reign of terror etched unforgettable scars on the hearts of all who encountered his story. He took the life of an innocent child on August 27, 1997. Once again, Joseph broke the law and was arrested. However, this time, the sentence wouldn't keep him behind bars for long. Just 3 years later, with the help of his lawyer, whom his boyfriend hired, Joseph was released. Reports indicated that Joseph's boyfriend, a wealthy doctor named Richard, had been his companion since the 1990s. They frequented LGBTQ+ bars together, and their relationship provided Joseph with the support he needed during his prison years, ultimately allowing him to regain his freedom. On July 14, 2000, Joseph walked out of prison into a new life. Richard had purchased a one-way plane ticket for him to Fargo, where he began a fresh start, enrolling at South Dakota State University. No one could have guessed that behind the polished exterior of a university student was a past filled with horrific crimes. Would anyone in Joseph's new neighborhood ever learn of his dark history? Or would they forever believe him to be a kind, good-hearted neighbor? Upon his release, Joseph was subject to strict restrictions. Every 3 months, he was required to report his residence to the police, and 4 times a year, officers visited his home for inspections. Additionally, Joseph had to remain on the U.S. National Sex Offender Registry for life. Those who commit crimes against children under 13 and have served time are classified as Level 3 offenders, the highest risk category. This meant his identity and address would be publicly available, placing him under constant community surveillance. Despite his efforts to hide his dark past, Joseph's secret couldn't remain concealed forever. A surprise visit from the police revealed the truth, though some neighbors remained unfazed. Joseph quickly integrated into the community, making friends with successful individuals, and even securing a part-time job. On his personal blog, he presented himself as a changed man, calling himself happy and expressing a commitment to turn his life around. But was he truly happy? Was this merely a perfect facade to hide the man he truly was? By June 2004, Josep's image as a happy, kind-hearted person began to fade. Just 1 year later, on March 4th, 2005, his charade came to a dramatic end when the police arrested him. That same day, he was charged with the abuse of a child. 8 months earlier, at Rose Elementary School in Choy Lake, Minnesota, a stranger had sneaked in and committed an unthinkable crime against a boy. During the investigation, it became clear that the perpetrator was none other than Josep. Thinking he could evade the consequences of his actions by committing interstate crimes, Josep was ultimately apprehended. Shockingly, the Bexar County Court had agreed to grant him bail with a $15,000 bond, secured by his wealthy friends. Josep promised to cooperate with the investigation, but would he honor that promise? This decision stirred outrage among the local community. Josep's previous claims of reform became meaningless, and in an effort to protect their children, the people of Fargo turned their backs on him. While the community was still reeling from the bail decision, Josep secretly prepared for his next crimes. Walmart transaction records showed that just 2 days before denying all allegations, Josep had bought several suspicious items, including night vision glasses and surveillance equipment. These actions only solidified the truth of his nature. After being granted bail, Josep quickly vanished from Fargo. He rented an SUV and swapped the license plates, evading the police's pursuit. On May 1st, a nationwide manhunt was issued for him. Meanwhile, Josep had already devised a gruesome plan for another horrifying crime. His new targets were 2 children, John and Sasta, aged 8 and 9. Initially, their disappearance was considered a simple case of murder, but the truth was far more complex. Josep's twisted actions were driven by a desire for vengeance against society, an act of madness from a man who had nothing left to lose. Josep lured John and Sasta to a remote campsite in Lolo National Park, a desolate, isolated place. There, he intended to carry out his perverse plans. That night, Sasta felt something was off and confided in her older brother John. Despite John's attempts to reassure his younger sister, they had no idea the horror that awaited them. Hours later, their family was suddenly awakened by a dark figure standing in their living room. It was Josep, wearing black gloves and night vision goggles, holding a shotgun. He had come to terrorize the small family. When John and Sasta entered the living room, they were stunned to see their mother and brother bound and gagged. Josep stood triumphantly, as if savoring their fear, and pulled John and Sasta outside. He tightly bound the 2 children and took them to an even more desolate location. Inside the house, the faint cries for help from their mother and brother only heightened the children's terror. Sasta could never forget the desperate look in her mother's eyes or the agonizing screams of her brother. When Josep returned, he dragged her mother inside, leaving John and Sasta locked in the back seat of his car, unsure of what fate awaited them. After a long drive, the car finally stopped. The door opened, and John and Sasta were thrust into a living nightmare. The following days were a never-ending series of physical and mental torment. To amplify the children's suffering, Josep forced them to write letters to their father. With all her courage, Sasta penned a letter filled with sorrow but also hope, desperately trying to understand Josep's past in the hope of finding a weakness that could offer a way out. She noticed that when she mentioned an old acquaintance, particularly a man named Z, Josep seemed calmer. She began calling him Jay, hoping to create a bond that might somehow help her escape. John and Sasta held hands, seeking comfort in each other's eyes as they witnessed the bruises on John's body. Sasta silently promised to protect him. However, that promise would become a burden she would carry for the rest of her life. One morning, the air shifted, growing heavy, when a gunshot rang out. John fell, blood pooling around him, staining the earth beneath. Sasta stood frozen, unable to cry out. Josep approached, raised the gun, and shot John once more. His brother's death was like a waking nightmare that would haunt Sasta forever. Josep then coldly ordered Sasta to help him burn John's body. Helpless and powerless, she could only watch as her brother's lifeless form was consumed by flames. Josep claimed it was a release for John. He then turned to Sasta and asked her how she wanted to die. She could either choose the same fate as John or suffocate, her neck strangled by a rope. In the face of her brother's tragic end, Sasta felt as though the world had collapsed around her. In that moment of utter despair, a glimmer of hope emerged, but she had no way of knowing if it could save her. After being released on bail, Sasta decided to make one final attempt, hoping to reach the conscience of Josep. She made a heartfelt plea, and miraculously, something shifted within him. Tears streamed down his face, and in that moment, Sasta found a glimmer of hope, a chance to change her fate. She cleverly suggested they return to Josep's hometown, and surprisingly, he agreed. With her intelligence and courage, Sasta began taking her first steps toward freedom. After 48 harrowing days of captivity, Sasta finally made it back to the safety of her home. Her arrival at a gas station was captured on video, which quickly circulated online. However, due to her shock and drastic appearance, no one recognized her immediately. Fortunately, a server at a local diner, who had seen the photos circulating on social media, recognized Sasta. She recalled a suspicious man with a terrified and dirty girl entering the diner early that morning. Feeling uneasy about the stranger, she immediately notified the manager and discreetly contacted the police. When the authorities arrived, Sasta was too scared to speak at first, but under the chilling gaze of Josep, she found the strength to speak up. Josep was swiftly arrested, and Sasta was rushed to the hospital. At last, she was reunited with her beloved father. Meanwhile, a police investigation made significant progress. Evidence collected from Josep's vehicle, including tools, GPS devices, and a memory card containing chilling recordings, solidified his guilt. Despite his stubborn denial, the irrefutable evidence and Sasta's testimony were enough to convict him. The police traced the location of the crime, and on July 4th, John's lifeless body was discovered. The family was devastated, and the pain was unimaginable. In the early stages of investigation, Josep remained silent, forcing Sasta to face the traumatic memories once more. Despite the overwhelming pain, she bravely testified against the man who had caused so much suffering. With Sasta's testimony and the undeniable evidence, Josep was convicted of his horrendous crimes and sentenced to death. However, fate had other plans. Before the sentence could be carried out, Josep passed away in prison on March 28, 2021, due to brain cancer. Now, Sasta lives a peaceful life as a mother of 4, alongside her husband, Michael, in Boise. Her journey has been filled with struggles and tears, growing up in the shadow of a painful past. To numb the pain, Sasta turned to substances, starting with alcohol and drugs at the age of 13. She fell into bad company, desperately trying to forget the torment she had endured. She carried the weight of guilt, knowing she had survived when her brother did not. Yet, through incredible determination and the support of her family, Sasta overcame her dark days. Today, she finds happiness in her role as a mother and wife, a living testament to the power of human will. She frequently appears in the media, reminding the world of her painful past. In 2018, she relapsed and found herself in legal trouble, but the strain of family conflict pushed her to the edge. Sasta's life seemed to spiral out of control, much like a never-ending cycle. Her story was brought back into the public eye with a documentary by People and Discovery Channel, shedding light on her journey once again. As she reflects on her past, the pain lingers, but she hopes that time will heal her wounds, allowing her to find peace. What are your thoughts on the actions of this twisted murderer, Josep? Feel free to share your opinion in the comments below. And before you leave, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss any classic cases on the Crime Secrets channel.